Hi, everybody. I want to welcome John Philipson. He is a media law expert and attorney here in town.
Yes.
And he's going to talk a little bit about, with us collectively, about this lawsuit involving our good friend Alexa and what she may have been up to that may not have been legal, both in Washington State and in the state of Florida. Florida is one of 8 states that have privacy laws that are similar to Washington State, and that's the basis for a lawsuit filed in Washington State and also in California on behalf of 2 minors who were recorded by their Alexa devices. And the basic gist of the complaint is that they did so without knowledge or consent of these minors. So the lawsuit is against Amazon, which is the maker of the Alexa device. I just want to read a brief part of this lawsuit before we get started with our conversation, and feel free to post your questions and your comments so that I can ask them to John and he can respond in real time. The class action complaint and demand for jury trial starts as follows. Millions of Americans use Amazon's smart speaker technology, Alexa, in their homes. People speak to Alexa-enabled devices such as Echo or Echo Dot about everything from the mundane, Alexa, what's the weather, to the deeply personal, Alexa, what are the symptoms of depression? Most people believe that when they speak to an Alexa-enabled device, it converts their voice into a set of digital computer instructions. They expect that this digital query is sent over the internet for processing, that a digital response is returned, and that the device then converts the response into Alexa's voice. They do not expect that Alexa is creating and storing a permanent recording of their voice. This expectation is reasonable, an important legal term, right? It would be easy for Alexa to work this way, as numerous other voice recognition technologies do. But Alexa does something else. After Alexa processes a user's commands, Amazon saves a permanent recording of the user's voice to its own servers. It then analyzes and uses these voice recordings for its own commercial benefit. These uses include allowing workers around the world to listen to the voice recordings and creating voice prints of users, which can be used to identify them when they speak to other devices in other locations. Amazon has thus built a massive database of billions of voice recordings containing the private details of millions of Americans. Amazon purports to obtain consent is an important word, to record individuals who set up an Alexa-enabled device. But there is a large group of individuals who do not consent to be recorded when using an Alexa-enabled device and who use Alexa without any understanding or warning that Amazon is recording and voice printing them. Then it says children is that group of people. Now, I think this applies to many adults as well, but this case involves 2 minors. And the practice, according to the plaintiffs, the complaint here, the practice violates the laws of 8 states. Florida is one of them. So let's talk a little bit about what the law is regarding recording a conversation here.
Sure. In Florida, we're a 2-party consent state, so you have to have the consent of both parties before you engage into the recording. But a big caveat, which is going to be the crux in this case, is reasonable expectation of privacy. So if you're in a public setting and you're having a conversation, just like you're at dinner one night and you hear someone eavesdrops on your conversation and you eavesdrop on theirs, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
You may overhear something.
Right. And is that if someone's recording a public conversation in the public setting, is that a reasonable expectation of privacy? And that's a case-by-case determination. And so that's where it's going to be fought in the trenches on this case is, what was the reasonable expectation of privacy? By focusing on children, they've added a new wrinkle to this. Because when we think of children, we think of, well, how could your child give consent? And so that's going to be the issue of the adult gave consent for the child, and whether that was a reasonable expectation of privacy in the home, because most of these echoes would be in the home setting.
So when you speak to Alexa, you are initiating a conversation. Does that mean that by speaking to Alexa, even if I may be a child or a minor, am I inferring that I am agreeing to be recorded? And is that inference a reasonable thing to expect?
I think that's where the defense lawyers will want to go with this case, is to say, the reasonable expectation based on our society and how we interact with your car audio when you're asking your car directions or play this station. We've now become so artificial AI AI based.
Yeah.
And so everything's AI, everything's hands free. Particularly now with new laws where you can't even use a cell phone to your ear, you're going to rely on AI.
Sure.
So saying, Alexa, play this, the argument's going to be, well, you consented. You engaged the conversation, not Alexa. You created the conversation that's being recorded. And that society, we all know that that's how it works. The reason Alexa's so effective is it's because it's gathering as much material as possible. Its AI effectiveness is based on saving this data. The wrinkle in this is, does a child know that? But if it's a parent, the argument that the defense counsel may raise is, well, the person that registered it, downloaded the Alexa app, consented to everyone in that household, and they had the ability to consent for that child.
Can you do that, though, on behalf of a minor child?
Well, we do it every day with when you take your child to the pediatrician. You're consenting for the care of them.
Mm.
Otherwise, someone would claim it would be battery.
Okay.
So you've consented to your child's care. Now, will that consent carry over to the Alexa? That's an issue that's going to be decided by the court. Was that within the scope of your consent? And where there may be some support would be in the terms and conditions of your app download.
Mm.
All of us are rushing to download apps. I just want to get going. I want to just use whatever I'm using the device.
Every day,
yeah,
right?
Every day.
We do this all the time.
How many times do we do, even for children, we see the release for something, we sign it, we're like,
Without
that's
hesitation.
fine. Without hesitation. They want to play soccer that day. I'm just going to sign it. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be where there may be some information Amazon can use to say, well, you consented to a broad use.
So legally, is there a situation in which a child has the authority to waive his or her own consent to something? Because usually you hear no, that they
the
can't.
minor, typically a minor is viewed as could not give consent. Is usually you have to have, for example, if a minor, a 16-year-old went to go purchase something, in many states it's void. The contract would be void. They didn't have the authority or the consent to do it. That's why
Marriage is a good example
marriage.
of that.
Or if you go to buy a car, you always have to have a parent sign for the vehicle.
A cosign.
A cosigner on the vehicle, not just a guarantor, but a cosigner to it.
Mhm.
Or many kids when they're going to college to rent an apartment.
Yeah, on that lease, right?
That lease, you need a cosigner.
Interesting.
And so, but the flip side of all this from the plaintiff's perspective is you're dealing with some of the most vulnerable individuals in society. And the thought that your minor child is being recorded. As a parent, it's scary.
Yeah.
You
it
think
is
about
scary.
it, children put on Facebook, children put on other media, and it's a different world than
Yeah.
the one we grew up in.
It's the Wild West. It's so unregulated, especially with YouTube and all the things that we have out there for kids to kind of get into and make themselves public,
Yeah.
whether their parents are aware of it or not. And a lot of this is done, frankly, without parental supervision, which I think makes it a little scarier. What about, though, the other side of the coin?
Mhm.
What do you think are the strong arguments that would be made on the opposite side?
On the opposite side, because they've limited themselves to two-party consent states, the emphasis will be it has to be a knowing consent is what they're going to claim. That it wasn't a knowing consent. There's a kind of a theory of if you click on yes on your terms and conditions, you've agreed to that.
Mm-hmm.
They would say it wasn't knowing, that it was buried in the terms and conditions if it was there
Mm-hmm.
to be able to record, and that the child they couldn't have knowingly consented for their child because it wasn't clear. They may have consented for the recording of themselves. Because notice the lawyers did not seek the protections for the owners,
adults.
for adults
Yeah.
when they purchased it. So that's their strongest argument is it wasn't a reasonably foreseeable consent. It wasn't reasonable expectations of privacy would have been, yes, my privacy may have been invaded in this, and I can see that, but my child's I couldn't foresee. And so that's going to be the argument. And a lot of these class actions, typically, they have two different stages. You have the class certification stage, where can this even be a class action?
This is a request for trial.
This is
correct.
This is just the initial salvo. This is just saying I have a claim.
Mm-hmm.
But we have multiple steps in this one. As for class certification, the next step is, can this class be certified?
Do you have standing?
Do
right?
you have standing? Does this individual, a lot of times the defense lawyers will say, that person that brought the suit has no standing in this case.
Huh.
And that's how it gets knocked out.
Okay. Could that happen in this
This
case?
could happen here. They may say, you're bringing as friend a minor, and then they would start digging into, Where did you purchase your Echo? How did you purchase your Echo? Did you allow your child to use your Echo? Did you buy it for your child? So you knowingly bought it with the idea of it being used for your child. So that's the next stage. After that is, if this gets certified, now we have a class, and then there's notice. Oftentimes with class actions, they never make it to a trial.
There's a settlement.
There's usually a settlement early on,
Yeah.
either before it's ever certified, or it is right after it gets certified, it's settled. Prior to being a media lawyer, I was a class action lawyer. So
Perfect.
I used to deal with these on a
Yeah.
daily basis of, okay, how are we navigating it? Because there may be a kink in Amazon's process, and oftentimes there's a monetary settlement and a promise to take certain steps. So now you may see if there was merit to the complaint, Amazon might change their policies. It may be there's going to be a clear statement of you are consenting to all users that use this.
Big label on Alexa.
Yeah.
Kind of like, this coffee might be hot.
Exactly, and that started same way that started.
We thought that was dumb.
Yeah.
Back when the famous McDonald's coffee
McDonald's
case,
spill.
right?
But this could happen
McDonald's
next.
spill,
You might
I forgot
have
that.
Alexa.
Yeah.
And Alexa goes, "Do I have your consent?" That could be the next step.
Yeah. And then your 4-year-old's question is, what is consent?
What is consent? And now you have a whole different ball of wax.
Right.
As a parent of little kids, of little toddlers, I would not want to have that discussion.
But I'd love to watch that conversation.
Yeah.
That would be highly entertaining.
Yes.
And probably will end up on YouTube, right?
Absolutely.
Here's my 4-year-old trying to discuss consent with Alexa.
And that's when I tell them that please don't become a lawyer like that.
Right? So this kind of class action, I think people kind of get excited when they see these things because they think, well, I'm a party that could be joining this lawsuit. When you talk about millions and millions of people, though, the money, if there is a settlement, that really gets dispersed quickly. And if you're expecting a big check in the mail, you might be sorely disappointed. A lot of times we get these things in the mail that say that you are part of a class action lawsuit. I've gotten them before. And I never get excited about it because I know what's coming. You don't have to do anything at all to join this class action.
Right.
Do nothing. We've got your address. And when there's a settlement, we'll cut a check to everyone. But if it's like Cigna, that's a huge company. I'm not going to probably see, a quarter.
More than
25 cents maybe.
More than likely, it's like 25 cents, $5. It's the lead plaintiff would be the one that would get the majority of it. They're the ones sticking their neck out on it. There's attorney's fees under the statute. So Florida statute provision provides for attorney's fees for recovery and statutory damages. So there may be recovery for the lead plaintiff, but as it relates to the individual, it may be capped. In Florida, it's a minimum, I believe, of $1,000 for each day of the violation of the recording. So that could be for Florida residents, there might be something there.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it more than likely will work its way towards settlement. And then from the PR perspective, Amazon will more than likely want to take steps in the coming days, and you'll probably see press releases already, media advisories, going out to the different shows and talking about what their goal was, why this is important, and how it's really not an invasion. In Florida, we take privacy very seriously.
Very.
We have a constitutional amendment on privacy. So it's a different ball of wax in our state. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because each state is unique. They're all two-party consent states, but each has different policies and goals behind them.
Interesting. So if you had to take one side or the other as an attorney, you could take your pick, okay? You're the plaintiff's attorney, or you're defending Amazon on this one. Which one would you pick?
This is a tough one.
It's always a tough one.
It is a tough one. Luckily, my clients choose me. I don't have to choose them.
Yeah.
But I think just because of the way society has gone, just from practical standpoint, I would probably take the defense side on this because just thinking this through, if we now have to see consent every time we rent a car in a different city and it has voiceover, are you going to have a consent of some kind?
Something else to sign when you rent a car.
Another form you're going to have to sign. And what else is going to be in that form that you're signing? Or before you can ever ask the give me directions to TGI Fridays, it's going to say, well, do I have your consent to give you the directions to TGI Fridays?
Yeah.
And then it may inhibit the growth of AI
Okay.
in this process.
And that would be a valid argument on the defense side.
On the defense side is, the public policy argument of this is, we become an AI-dependent society.
So there's maybe a harm.
A harm if we go down this path of what's the remedy that you're going to do is, the whole point of having Alexa was, this is to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Also answer some of your kids' questions that you just don't know the answer to. It used to be we'd go to the encyclopedia.
Oh my gosh,
But-
yeah. In the Stone Age, we
Yeah.
had these things called books.
Books.
That we
There
used to
was
use.
these encyclopedias that you came every year, a new year.
Oh my gosh, so up to date, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, let me run through a couple of the questions and comments that we have from our viewers who are taking part in this conversation, because they often raise questions that I would not have thought of when we do these Facebook Lives. A lot of times they will say something that kind of takes the conversation to a different level or in a different direction, and they may wonder some things that we haven't thought of. I feel like we've covered quite a bit of legal territory. In particularly, do these people have standing? I mean, because that's the first question.
That'll be the first question out of the gate. There'll more than likely be a motion to dismiss on various grounds, and whether the basis of using multiple states. It may focus first. So in some class actions I've been in where it's tried to be a nationwide, we'll focus first on the state where it was filed. And focus
Washington
on
State.
Washington State.
Or California
Or
for the other
California.
one. Mhm.
And so, is this really applicable here?
Got it.
And then in this case, the plaintiff, and one of the ones was a Massachusetts plaintiff, I believe. So there's gonna be some choice of law analysis going on, and there's gonna be a lot of briefing before they make any progress.
Was this a lawyer-driven or lawyer-originated suit, in your opinion? Because kids don't come up with lawsuits. I mean, unless they're playing
Yeah.
lawyer at home. Maybe as a kid I did. I don't know. But was this driven by an attorney who wanted to bring a case against Amazon?
I don't think so in this one. These are real tough dilemmas that we're dealing with.
Okay.
It is a reputable, very, very reputable firm that brought this case.
Okay.
There are times where it's very lawyer driven. This one, it's a debate we're all having.
Sure.
I have a debate all the time on privacy of what I want out there.
Mhm.
How much do I want my kids on the internet? How
Yeah.
much of who do I share photos with?
It's kind of the classic American question of freedom from versus freedom of, right?
Exactly.
Because we want freedom from having our privacy violated, but we want the freedom to go about our business and make our lives super convenient and easy.
And it's been our constant debate since the founding of our country, from the quartering of troops during the Revolutionary War to just general type of things that we dealt with during McCarthyism. Every time this is a constant battle. And so this is a new front, is AI.
It's fascinating.
And how much you really love AI, you love the benefits of it.
We do, though. We really do.
And so this is one of those consequences. And I think it's just going to be about, there's going to be a point where we're going to say, enough's enough.
Right.
Before the robots run out. But there's a balancing act. And this is a prime example of a court trying to figure out, where are we?
I wouldn't be surprised if we're creating a new generation of kind of off-the-grid Unabomber type people too, who don't want anything to do with this, because people do have strong feelings about this. Eric says the multi-million-dollar lawsuit that you're lucky to get $10 from.
Yeah.
So he's referring to that phenomenon. Lydia says, Alexa, go to the bathroom for me. You know what? I mean, you're not too far off. Kevin says, as a joke, I had my phone on and started to talk about needing shoelaces. A few days later, there it was, an ad for shoelaces. We see this happen all the time, right?
Absolutely. You're in your email and you have the ads on the side, and all of a sudden, I was searching for new shoes, and all of a sudden there's New Balance ads there. Or I remember when we were expecting our first child, I felt like the internet knew before any of our family knew, because there was stuff
Don't log
about
on in front of any relatives.
Yeah, because then it was all about baby gear, and here's where you get the baby gear for this. And we were like, wow, our family doesn't know yet that we are having a son, but the internet does.
Yeah, Alexa knows.
Yeah, Alexa knows, your Gmail knows, it's all over.
Oh, let's see. Sherry says, I order cat treats, and if I didn't, my cats would be mad. Nearest Walmart is 20 miles. Okay. David says, actually, I haven't received money from these class action lawsuits, but I have gotten 3 to 5 years of identity theft monitoring. I've gotten so many of these that I don't have to worry about monitoring for the next 20 years.
And that's a prime example of where defendant, instead of doing just monetary benefits, says we're changing our policy. We're going to provide a service for you. I'm think I've gotten a couple of those where my data's been stolen and somebody's monitoring it and someone's stealing it. I feel like it's just a tug of war.
Like an exchange almost, right? David says, don't blame scientists. How do you figure this is their fault? It's your fault. The responsibility for this goes on us all. If we didn't buy it, it would not exist, period. Is that kind of a legal argument?
It's kind of, that goes back to that consent idea of you purchase an Echo knowing that how it works. That it's, for it to give you those rapid fire answers, it needs to gather enough data over time. And so you kind of know when you're buying something like that. Same way when we buy a car and when it has the voiceless, you know that you're opening yourself up to certain things. And so the reasonable consumer would know. That's oftentimes you'll see this in class actions with food labeling. So you see a lot in California, the sugar.
Oh, yeah.
The big sugar lawsuits of, I didn't know my cereal had sugar in it.
Or
you look
soda.
and then you look at the photo on the cover and it's embossed with sugar.
Clearly.
And so what's the reasonable consumer thinking? At the same time, we're not all scientists. We don't know all the details. And if it says on the box sugar-free or low sugar and you're diabetic, you may just take that. You may not go to the side
dangerous.
of the box. And so that's the plaintiff that's not one where it's generated by a lawyer. That's one where you have a legitimate beef of, I'm a diabetic and I rely on products saying what's low sugar and what's not.
Sherry's asked a really good question. I knew somebody would bring criminal law into this, and I know that's not your area of expertise, but I think you'll be able to answer this. She wants to know if voice recognition can be used against her in a crime. I'm sure this has happened already.
It has different elements.
Facial recognition is
used,
right?
And then, but it depends on how the state attorney obtained it. When
like
it
the
was
fruit of the poison tree argument?
Exactly, the fruit of the poison tree. How was it obtained? And so, if it can be used in a criminal case, it all depends on how it was obtained.
You have to get a warrant?
Well, it depends. Was it a conversation you had with someone where there wasn't a reasonable expectation of privacy?
Ah, okay.
And that person recorded it. There was no expectation of privacy. Let's say
that'll get thrown out. That won't be. You can't use that.
Well, and so there was no expectation of privacy, but they also have a number of issues there. You have hearsay arguments if it's going to be used against you because it's an out-of-court statement. There's a number of layers that can be used, and so it's a complicated question, and it's really fact-specific.
We're going to see more and more cases where that comes up, I'm sure. Lisa says, some things you have to update or else you can't view stuff. Aren't we almost forced to keep up or else?
And it's because as I think it was Kevin that raised this, your person chose. That's the dilemma. And anytime as a consumer you're choosing, you don't have to choose to do certain things.
You don't have to participate.
You don't have to participate.
Right? Yeah. That's the defense argument.
You
don't like it?
You don't have to participate. You knowingly chose it. I mean, we do that every day when we decide. When we sign up for the point system at Starbucks, we're consenting to Starbucks getting data on us and our purchase preferences. But it makes it easier when you go in your app and you say, that's the one I want.
Right.
And pick it up.
You. Even getting in a car. I mean, our cars basically have these black boxes, and they'll tell the story of you driving. And if you're in an accident, it may tell a story that may be different from the one that you were hoping law enforcement would get.
And it's the balancing act too, because our state is we value privacy so much that we created a constitutional amendment to protect our rights to privacy. And so it's one of those balancing acts from a state perspective, from the Florida government, of when does it want to protect our right to privacy, and then when do we raise that argument in saying this was not only a wiretap violation, but was an invasion of privacy. And so you're balancing the two.
Interesting. Diane's saying, so are my children being recorded when they talk to Alexa? Yes,
yes.
they
exactly,
are.
Yeah.
If you have the same understanding of these plaintiffs, the other side of that, and we haven't addressed this yet, is there is an option where you can tell Alexa, but you have to initiate this, to delete everything from the day. But it's dependent upon you to do that.
Yes, and similar with your iPhones. My wife actually pointed this out to me the other day. Is the general settings on your iPhones are Siri's set to memorize certain things in all your apps.
Uh-huh.
So you need to go into your settings and remove Siri from your apps in order so Siri isn't collecting information about your apps.
Oh, Siri is so sneaky.
So that's the thing where you don't even realize it. Every time you're using a particular app, Siri's gathering that information, collecting that data.
Yeah.
And so you need to go into your settings if you don't want that, similar to the Echo, and say, delete all of that, or I don't want you monitoring this.
That's similar to not joining other apps using your Facebook account.
Right.
A lot of times you get asked, do you want to just log in through Facebook? And we go, yeah, because it's so quick.
Well,
but do you want to do that?
No, now you have another avenue of consent. The same thing is getting really popular of when you purchase things. Do you want to use a third-party app that recognizes all your data that you've stored to purchase? Apple Pay, Amazon. When you go to purchase, I purchased something a couple of weeks ago, and it says, "Do you want to use your Amazon account to purchase?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that's easy. I remember that password."
Yep.
So,
Visa Express, I think, is another one.
yes, and so the more everything's, we love the simplicity of it. We love the ease of it. But at the same time, it's that every time it's that consequence. And it's an individual choice, too.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes down to is, what do you choose? There are certain things where I've said, I just don't want to deal with this. So I'm not going to agree.
So I'll give you my email address and do it the harder way, which requires us to type in something.
Or going back to pre-cell phones, everything, when the cell phone was still like bolted to the car.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't have to provide your social security number when you're filling out forms. It's not required. They don't necessarily need that information of leaving that blank on your forms for things you sign up for.
Yeah.
So,
that's actually very smart.
Because it's easy for that. And a lot of doctors' offices don't need that. They have your insurance card. They have everything they need to verify.
Yeah, you can skip that one. That's great advice for people.
And that's going old school to just not just your apps, but how you fill out forms by paper.
That's true. Ida says, I have never shared any ideas for creations that I have. This is getting into patent law. So you're covering all areas of the law today. That I have near my phone, as I've literally had them stolen. Constantly spies. Pulls up ads reflective of my conversations. Well, I mean, that's probably true, and they're probably trying to market something to you. I don't know that they're stealing your ideas, but that certainly could happen in theory.
And in Florida, idea theft has a huge wrinkle. I actually had a case a few years about this.
Yeah.
On idea theft.
Oh, good.
In Florida, we have a statute of frauds on idea theft.
Okay.
So if it's not a something that could be copyrightable, if you don't have an agreement with them in writing, you don't have a basis to bring a claim.
So your intellectual property is not yours necessarily.
Necessarily in the statute, because the ideas themselves aren't protectable. It's how they're implemented. And in Florida, we have an idea theft statute of frauds, which says it has to be reduced to writing when you provide it to someone. So if you say, I have a great idea for a TV show, and you tell someone, and they go off and do the show.
Don't do that around here.
Yeah. You want to have it in writing of, we've agreed, I'm sharing this with you. You want to have some type of documentation because of the statute of frauds.
That's interesting.
And there's only 4 cases out there in Florida on this. It's a very rarely used statute.
Well, that's a fun one. Tari says, but by buying the device and using it, how do you simultaneously not give permission to record? Alexa, play Ariana Grande, or Alexa, I need Tide Pods doesn't quite work without sound recognition. Maybe it's just me. So he's asking this in kind of a form of a statement / question, I think. And I'm guessing that what he's asking is there a way to utilize this tool without the recording aspect? And I think the answer is no, and you'd have to just wipe it out after the fact. Is that right?
That would, from my understanding, your best bet is like the minute you make that and you get what you need, wipe it out.
Yeah.
And just kind of constantly wiping it out is your safest bet. It's the way it's structured now, and that might be a remedy that Amazon provides. Is we're sending out a new upgrade to the Echoes, and you're going to be able to make an easier deletion of
Maybe a button.
or some type of upgrade to remove those. Kind of like how you can clear your, even with your phones, if you try to clear your voicemails or text messages,
Yeah.
they're always there.
Somewhere,
because you can do a search in your iPhone today for some chain that you thought you deleted a year or two ago. You can still find it
it's all out
while
there
searching
somewhere.
for it. It's still out there.
This is why people fear the cloud, right? Because it's might be off your device, but
Yeah.
it's probably in the cloud.
And there's like the old saying is, if you can tell it in person, not in writing. So
That is very good advice from a lawyer. We're
Yeah.
going to stop it there because we've been going for a half an hour. I appreciate you being
Oh.
here so much, John. This was great
thanks for
information.
having me. It was great.
Yeah, we'll have you back for sure. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tonight at 5 o'clock.